lama dhowran kare dhawaaqa maqlow kacay maqla dhiidhiyo kacay wixii dhiiqanow kacay damiirku intaanu dhiman bukeena difaacane dhaliyaroy kacay waxaan lama dhowran kare dhawaaqa maqlow kacay maqla dhiidhiyo kacay wixii dhiiqanow kacay damiirku intaanu dhiman bukeena difaacane dhaliyaroy kacay waxaan lama dhowran kare dhawaaqa maqlow kacay maqla dhiidhiyo kacay wixii dhiiqanow kacay damiirku intaanu dhiman bukeena difaacane dhaliyaroy kacay waxaan lama dhowran kare dhawaaqa maqlow kacay maqla dhiidhiyo kacay wixii dhiiqanow kacay damiirku intaanu dhiman bukeena difaacane dhaliyaroy kacay waxaan lama dhowran kare dhawaaqa maqlow kacay maqla dhiidhiyo kacay wixii dhiiqanow kacay damiirku intaanu dhiman bukeena difaacane dhaliyaroy kacay waxaan lama dhowran kare dhawaaqa maqlow kacay maqla dhiidhiyo kacay wixii dhiiqanow kacay damiirku intaanu dhiman bukeena difaacane dhaliyaroy kacay.
The Jewish problem was particularly acute in Eastern Europe in the late 19th and early 20th century. Millions of Jews emigrated, flooding Western Europe and the United States with Jewish refugees. After over 1,800 years of Jews being persecuted and exiled from country after country, it finally occurred to the world that maybe the best place for the Jews was back where they started, before the Romans conquered Jerusalem and exiled the Jews from the homeland in the year 70. The British motivation for eliminating the Ottoman Empire was primarily economic. They wanted to create a rail line from the Mediterranean coast to the Far East. And they wanted to have economic influence in the new countries established in place of the Ottoman Empire. The French, on the other hand, wanted control of Lebanon, where they historically protected the Christian majority, and they considered it the mission to bring modern civilization to the primitive Arabs. When the Sheriff of Mecca made his deal with the British to establish a unified Arab caliphate comprised of all the Arab provinces of the Ottoman Empire, he didn't view those provinces as individual states with individual nations. He viewed all the Arabs as one nation. His son Emir Faisal even signed an agreement with Chaim Weizmann in 1918, agreeing in principle to the idea of a Jewish national home in Palestine.
"70 years have passed since the Nakba, the catastrophe in Arabic, took place in Palestine in 1948, in which more than 750,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced from their homes and pushed into refugee camps in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and neighboring countries. But the Nakba didn't end in 1948. The catastrophe continues to affect more than 12 million Palestinians, who remain stateless today. Historical Palestine was mostly made up of Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and a small number of Jews, who generally lived together peacefully. The persecution of Jews across Europe led them to believe that they were not safe there, and Zionists saw Palestine as a prime location for a Jewish homeland.
And it was clear that there were Palestinians on the land. Zionist leaders and common people alike got used to the idea that the only way of making Palestine a Jewish state is by causing the Palestinians to leave.
The Jewish Zionist movement began organizing immigration and buying land in Palestine. This was the first step in turning Palestine into a Jewish homeland. Then World War I began. Britain promised Zionist support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. This came as a formal political letter, known today as the Balfour Declaration. It also included that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. When World War I ended and the Ottoman Empire was defeated, Britain occupied Palestine.
Britain provided the muscle under which they could simply emigrate. I mean, they couldn't have immigrated were it not for the British presence, because the crucial battle in the early stages was simply getting Jews into Palestine and acquiring land. They couldn't have done that without British government's sponsorship.
Jewish migration into Palestine continued for decades, and the Palestinian people organized large demonstrations against this influx. Palestinians saw British support of Zionism as biased and unfair. So the people of Palestine revolted in 1936 to fight against British and Zionist occupation. During the 3-year uprising, thousands of Palestinians were killed, and hundreds of British citizens and Jewish Zionists died as well. Britain dismantled the Palestinian Revolution, leaving them with no political or military leadership. However, the British also began limiting Jewish migration. This upset the Jews who had fought with the British during the uprising and led them to create their own forces. Zionist militias carried out bombing attacks against both the British and the Palestinians. As things got out of hand, the British announced in 1947 that they'd be ending their mandate on Palestine. The file on Palestine was then transferred to the UN, which suggested dividing Palestine into an Arab and Jewish state. As the British were preparing to leave, the new Jewish population began taking over, and it helped that they were heavily armed. The ethnic cleansing of Palestinians began months before the British officially left Palestine. Zionists were taking over major cities and hundreds of villages, forcing thousands of Palestinians into neighboring countries.
It happened many times that the Israeli, very holy soldiers took 10 of the youngsters in the middle of the village, shot them just in order to kill them, in order that all the others will see it and run away. And if it's not enough, they took others also.
The British ended their mandate on May 14, 1948, leaving their tanks and armored weapons to the newly created State of Israel. From the time the British occupied Palestine in 1917 to when they left in 1948, the number of Jews is estimated to have multiplied 10 times to 500,000. As Zionist Jews declared the State of Israel on May 14, 1948, the surrounding Arab nations declared war, with the objective of liberating Palestine. Although Palestine had the support of other Arab nations and they outnumbered the Jewish population, the Israelis also had foreign military, political, and financial support.
They were highly prepared, highly dedicated, well-armed, fighting force, which was superior to all the Arab armies combined.
Israel grew beyond the UN partition lines during the Arab-Israeli War by destroying Arab villages and further reducing the Palestinian population. By April 1949, more than 500 villages and 10 cities were captured by the Israelis. Over 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes, and over 13,000 Palestinians had been killed. Even then, the Nakba did not end. Today, Israel occupies the whole of historical Palestine. Israelis continue to build illegal settlements on occupied Palestinian territories. Palestinians in the West Bank live under military law, which subjects them to checkpoints, curfews, and arbitrary arrests. Palestinians in Gaza live under a blockade imposed by Israel. Gaza is set to become unlivable by 2020. Palestinians today continue to demand their right to return to their homes. For them, the Nakba will not end until this right is granted.
هربت أنا والله يرحم أمي وإلي أخوه محمود كان كبير الله يرحمه ويجمعنا متخافوش وقت حتى أخوي بمخزن لن ولن أنسى هذا المخزن أحمد يوسف أحمد معتوق، مواليد مدينة يافا 1941 ميلادي. كان أبوي الحي الله يرحمه صياد. دارنا على المينا، البلد القديمة، وين الجامع الكبير. أنزل على أبوي وهو بالبوابير في البحر، يصرخ علي يقول لي كيف طالع؟ أقول له يابا بحب البحر، يدوني خيمة وأعيش على شط البحر. أطلع على أبوي وهو بصرخ، والعالم حريمنا الفلسطينيين بيوقعوا من اللنج، من الرماح ومن الهون الإسرائيلي. الهون نزل على باب دارنا وعلى حالنا. أبوي شرد ما قدرش يمسكنا وإحنا مفتفتين. الله يرحم أمي جريئة الله يرحمها، لمتنا وأخذتنا على جمرك كان في قلب المينا. عمري ما بنسى، يجينا من الأنطرشر على المحطة وجابونا هنا وبقينا هنا. من مدينة لمخيم بعين الله، ايش اوصف له؟ انهدوا الخيام علينا، والشتاء والمطر والبرد كان علينا. احنا ملاكين بيافا، دور ومنازل. الله قال ابن بلغاريا والبرتغال يعيش بيافا وانا اعيش بمخيم. انا دائما بقول للاولاد يفهموا انه إلنا بلد، والبلد اخذوها هيك بالعنف والعنف للبدو، واحنا بلادنا هيك يافا على البحر على الساحل. المنظر هذا تاع الشباب والشيوخ والنساء والعالم بيثبت انه فلسطين إلنا ويافا بلدي.
Subscribe our YouTube channel Valley.